Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerd Steve, and today I am joined by Jeremiah McCoy. Basics of the game over on TikTok, and you also have a website as well. As always, those things are in the description. When this thing is not live and goes up, it'll also be in the pinned post as well. How are you
Sure.
doing today, sir?
I am uh I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know it's a little rough for you. Like you said, you usually work until the wee hours of the morning for your day gig, and this is a little bit early for you.
Absolutely.
So, and as I said before, I can totally sympathize, having done, overnight work for quite some time, and you know, it, when you do that for a while, it becomes weird to hang out with us day walkers.
Well, it's I miss it. I miss working days and
Yeah,
having daytime hours.
yeah. Well, most of us aren't really designed to work overnight anyway.
Indeed.
So you're kind of an old dude like me, and you're doing TikToks, which, I don't see a lot of old dudes on there.
It's true. Towards the beginning of the year I began seeing people on Twitter who I had sort of followed on Twitter uh for other reasons sharing TikToks, and some of them were D&D related, and I was like, oh, that's interesting, I should go check that out, see what the kids are doing,
Yeah.
as they say. And I started hanging out, and I enjoyed some of the content I was seeing, and I was like, you know what, I can do some of this. I've done podcasting, I've done YouTube videos, I can do this. How hard can it be? And uh, I also didn't see a lot of. Initially, what got me making stuff was wizards stuff. A lot of people talking about bards,
Mm.
not a lot of people talking about wizards. And I kind of look like a wizard. So I started making wizard content and making sort of snarky videos about being a wizard. And yeah.
So the wizard was being underrepresented, so you had to get in there.
Yes, it's but one of the ones that took off early was I made a joke about, everybody talks about bards being so social and they can make friends. Well, as a necromancer, give me enough bodies and I can make friends too.
Yeah. I also saw you. So one of your TikToks. I don't know if it was a recent one or if I saw an older one where you're talking about necromancy and necromancers, because I always kind of argue and battle with the fans and the people on YouTube over this one, because I don't know the concept of the good necromancer. But and I'm always like, there's a lot of arguments for it, but ultimately I'm like, well, anytime you animate dead, all you've done is brought evil into the world by
Yeah,
raw, by raw. Like you can play whatever you want in your homebrew, but
sure.
when we're talking about 5e and the monster manual, and that's the skeleton and zombies that you're making, they're evil.
They are. And every culture on the planet has had some sort of uh, rules concerning about the treatment of the dead.
Unless you're
Uh,
cannibals.
well, they still have rules.
Yeah.
Even cannibals, in which cannibalism was part of the culture and not just some I'm starving and I can't do anything else, had rules concerning it, and it was usually some sort of ritualized show of honoring the dead rather than uh, you know just I'm hungry and I'm going to eat this instead of the antelope or whatever. Um, I think so that the debate about necromancy in D&D sort of goes there. Also, the classic necromancer villains are summoning up an army of undead. There's a bunch of things there in 5e in particular. Uh, the way and previous editions do this too. A lot of the damaging, unpleasant spells are necromantic. You can make an argument that necromancy is evil, but it's also the source of raised dead
Yeah.
and resurrection and true resurrection. All of those come from necromancy. It can be good. As I put it on TikTok, necromancy as a magic by itself may not be evil. Necromancers usually are.
That is a great way of summing it up. And even like my thing is always like, well, you can use necromancy and even be a necromancer, but the minute you start animating the dead, you've generally crossed the line. Unless you have some kind of homebrew where your undead aren't evil and they're not, they don't have any particular affiliation. I thought maybe we were going to see that in 5e with Eberron, and then I opened up, their to their undead. I'm like, nope, they're still evil.
Well, yeah, I mean, even in 3.5, the Eberron undead were still evil. They were just controlled evil.
Yeah.
I think um, I I think there is an interesting conversation that happens in D&D circles about morality. And I think it has a lot to do with trying to simplify morality into the the alignment chart,
Yeah.
and it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, we're so close to just getting rid of alignment this time around, but they just couldn't do it.
Yeah, like
It has no teeth anymore.
moral philosophy has been a subject of debate for thousands of years. Trying to codify it does not help, because what you end up with is people trying to gamify their moral decisions.
Yeah.
So you end up with honestly, the idiocy that is people arguing Thanos was actually like lawful neutral. What? Yeah, he wasn't evil. He committed genocide.
Yeah.
Well, but it made sense in his head. No, it doesn't matter if it makes sense in your head. You commit genocide, you get the evil tag.
Yeah.
You're evil. And I think D&D, because we have that alignment thing, and it does lend to that discussion that somehow you're because you can put rules on it, you are changing the conversation towards arguing whatever you want is good or whatever you want is bad, and it's silly.
We're nerds and we like to engage in silly things.
That's true. That's true. And D&D is recently, the D&D team over at Wizards has said, yeah, hey, maybe we should remove this race is evil and so on. And I'm in favor of that. Given the history and how things played out, I can see how the designers didn't think anything about it at the time. Like, they didn't have nefarious, we are going to make other people feel excluded kind of plans. But in retrospect, it wasn't a good plan. And I yeah, let's remove that. But animating the dead is maybe different. One, they don't have wills. They aren't people in the sense that they don't have sentience generally. Um, you know, Death Knights and liches aside, skeletons, zombies, they don't have actual sentience. And just their sheer existence is kind of hurtful to anybody who might have known them.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, there's that, and they also seem to want to snuff out life. Like
Right.
that's kind of like a recurring theme with all undead, whether they are intelligent or not.
Yeah. I mean, there are more examples of the intelligent undead that aren't evil,
Yeah.
because they have sentience. They are capable of making judgments. But I once wrote up a thing on how liches become liches, based off of the various versions and the various editions. Almost all of this is how you became a lich are just evil to get there.
Yeah, you got to feed your phylactery like a soul a year or something.
Right. And in the current version, it's feed your phylactery. But even before that, it was like to achieve the state, you had to make this potion that involved like the blood of innocents that were killed by phase spiders, and like it was terrible. Like everything, every step of the way was just you're evil just doing this. You can't do this and then suddenly go, well, I'm good now.
Yeah. True. I was Hitler, but now I'm Gandhi. It doesn't
Yeah.
generally work that way.
So yeah, but they have over the years had a few, exceptions. Eberron's got the sort of undead ancestors of the elves, which are sort of animated by positive energy rather than negative energy.
Which doesn't exist anymore, I don't think.
Well, the explanation doesn't work the same, I guess, in the current metaphysics of the game, but
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah,
Eh,
that is one of the struggles of being an old guy in D&D is you have so much lore and mechanics like
yeah,
steep you're steeped in from depending on how many editions you've played.
I've done. You familiar with the Tome Show podcast?
I am.
I did a show for them called Monstrous Ecologist, where I would do the history of different monsters. So it's weird for me because I actually spent some time researching
Mhm.
and doing like bits on the history of some of the monsters, and it's fascinating to watch them change over the years. But yeah, liches. It took me 3 episodes to cover all the changes that they made to liches over the years. So
Yeah, I mean, and at some point they came out with that was it the Balnorn, which is like the good lich.
yeah, it's the Elven Good Lich from second edition made it into third, and they sort of hand wave it like they're made into liches and they're doing a sacrifice to get there, but they don't actually explain too much about how that
Yeah.
sacrifice is done.
Well, we don't want to talk about that. Yeah.
And it might be if you were to expand it out and write a like a this is how they become that way. They do an evil act so that they can exist long enough to do some good. There's some interesting moral discussions to be had there. You know,
Yeah.
is it okay to do a singular evil act so that you can exist for thousands of years to do good? Uh, you know, that's an interesting question. And maybe somebody has run that game.
Well, I mean, that being said, even like real world religions, if you look through them, you know, the gods have done many bad things just because they got miffed.
Yeah.
Not
Oh,
even
yeah.
necessarily to do good.
Well, even Judeo-Christian. I mean, after God floods the world, he says, "Yeah, I'm not going to do that again."
Yeah,
Um,
my
so
bad.
it's my bad. Lost my temper there.
Yeah,
So yeah, and all the other myths, legends, and religions have similar elements where it's like, yeah, that time they went too far, and maybe they realized they went too far. So, but yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Undead brings out interesting that side of D&D philosophy, I guess, because there is a philosophy in D&D, and people sort of skirt the edges of it and don't. Sometimes they don't critically think about it, and sometimes they do, and it makes for interesting conversations.
so dive into the chat occasionally for questions. And folks, as usual, if you have a question, just throw a question in front of it. Rivers RPG wants to know how long have you guys been playing D&D?
Well, I started playing in 1982. So,
Now you're making us do math.
um, so 38 years.
Yeah, I want to say I was first exposed when I was like 5, and it was like I wouldn't say I started playing then though, like 5 or 6. My neighbor came over, he had the red box, and and then like I played like a session of Gamma World, or we made characters or something. Like I said, I vaguely remember.
Yeah.
But I was in the I was pretty young, but I didn't start playing until I was like in my teens, so like 30 years, I want to say.
I um I had I have an interesting bit that I love recounting because it flies in the face of some people who are like, yo, dude, we never had women playing back in the day or something. My mom bought me my first uh D&D set in 1981, December 1981, because she was tired of me getting into hers.
Hmm.
She played before me. So and yeah, I I definitely have played a lot of things since, but that's the start.
You're second generation.
Yeah. Um, I'm not old enough to have played in, ODD.
Yeah.
But I did play box set, and both Moldove and Metzger box sets back in the day.
Yeah. So they can't. I mean, AD&D and the box sets, I believe, came out pretty basically at the same time anyway. They're
Yep.
just they, you know, they were just separate. They were just different games. I started with first edition, the second printing were the first books that I owned,
Yeah.
and then like soon after that, we moved into second. And that's like where my main group we played up until like third edition came out.
Yeah. The parallel evolution of box sets and advanced Dungeons and Dragons is interesting. Um, because the box sets kept the race is class,
Yeah,
where you weren't a dwarven fighter, you were dwarf. Um, you weren't an elven mage, you were an elf. Um, and they eventually added extra races, I guess. The race class options where like there was a dwarven cleric in one of the gazetteers
yeah,
initially, and then you could play the dwarven cleric from the gazetteer, but it wasn't like a core class at the beginning. There wasn't a race class combo. It was just, you played a fighter or you played an elf or a dwarf or what have you.
magic
Uh,
user and thief.
yes. Um,
Back in my day, when you had to earn being a wizard.
I played magic users back in the day, and they were interesting. I am amused by the people who. So I do the TikTok thing,
Yeah,
and there are certain tropes that come up on TikTok, and people making fun of wizards for being fragile.
yeah.
Uh,
And like you kid, you don't even know what fragile is.
I was like, I started with magic users where
Yeah,
they rolled a D4 for their hit points and did not have cantrips. And yeah, they were super fragile, and we still played them because once you got past, say, about eighth level, they became terrifying. Yeah, they went from I can be killed by a strong breeze to I'm going to end this field battle.
yeah, yeah. Our the group that would one eventually kind of spawn Nerdarchy. The first campaign I ran was this evil campaign, and I slowly but surely wiped the party. And the last character that was left was the Drow Necromancer, who was trapped in a sepia snake sigil. So he didn't technically die, but yeah, it was the Drow Necromancer of Doom with 15 hit points at seventh level. So,
And yeah, the the funny thing to me about all the kids, and to me, I guess they are kids, most of them, making uh the jokes about the fragile wizard now. I was like, guys, you're calling back to tropes that started before some of you were born.
yeah, yeah,
The current version of wizard is somewhat robust. I mean, yeah, you most like your average wizard build, you probably don't want to put on the front line, but I can build that character. Like I can make the first level wizard that can hold his own on the front line if I want to. Give them some false life, take a race that gives them some decent armor, and suddenly they're a viable choice on a frontline fighter. They're not going to be as good as a fighter for that purpose, but they can hold their own. They're survivable.
Yeah, yeah, and especially if you go away from wizard to like a sorcerer, and where you can take the draconic that's already a little tanky, and
Sure.
pick one of the races that gives you that extra hit point, which makes a big difference at first level.
Yeah, and I have recently started doing throwing shade at the different classes, and
Poor ranger.
yeah, well, so Rangers don't deserve the shade they get. I don't think. I think Ranger is still a compelling class. It's just we are too often obsessed with just the combat aspect.
Yeah,
And yes, they do fall a little behind on the combat aspect, but you absolutely want a ranger in your party if you have an exploration tier to your gameplay. They are the best class for that.
I've played several rangers, several beastmasters, and I play them right out of the player's handbook, and I haven't found them to be a problem in the party. I haven't found them to
Nope.
be less effective. I mean, there are some oddities like from the Rangers kit with the Beastmaster that I just felt like poor design choices, but but they still hold their own, and especially if you figure out how to use your Beast Companion effectively.
Yeah, and there are a wide range of beasts out there. I wrote a blog post about like adding a bunch of beasts if you want. There are a lot of third party publishers out there publishing books of nothing but beasts to
Yeah,
use as your beast master to make them maybe a little more interesting. But I mean, even if you don't go beastmaster, I mean, Gloomstalker is really compelling. I like Horizon Walkers. I mean, they definitely have a wide range of capabilities, and when they get their striking off, they are really good at it. Like they can deal some decent damage. So
yeah.
I
I've also seen quite a bit of that in the games that I've run, where they don't. I guess maybe it's the higher levels people say that they fall behind. I just
yeah,
haven't really seen it that much.
I dispute how many people are actually reaching high levels.
Good point.
Because playing high levels is not something that comes up that often. I mean, let's face it. In the busy world we live in, people will get interrupted, and the game will be on hold for 6 weeks, and then somebody will start a new game. And yeah, that happens a lot. I've seen this happen plenty of times. So maybe you don't actually reach the top end levels anyway. Um, but yeah, the hate that Rangers get is undeserved, and I like them. I think that I throw shade at all of the classes on TikTok just so I can, be uh, equal opportunity offender.
There you go.
I think the one for Rangers was that for
Furries.
all.
I think it was something about furries.
No, that was Druids. It's like yeah, Druids. You just wanted to be a furry, but you didn't want it to be weird.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I like to do a lot of the humor posts on TikTok. I also try and be there to answer questions for people. Kind of some of the stuff that you guys do on Nardarchy, like people will ask me like, "What's a good build for this?" and "How do I do this?" and so on. So sometimes I'll answer questions, but a lot of the stuff I do is just humor stuff. Um,
I think
and
the platform kind of lends to that too because it's short. It's your quick bits.
there are some brilliant. Um, there's an odd new art form, that I don't think TikTok invented. It probably started on something like Vine, but uh, it's still interesting and kind of compelling to watch, where people will take audios that have nothing to do with what they're making a video about,
Yeah.
creating a lip sync that makes it an interesting story that is tied to what they're doing. Like either it's a movie audio or a song or something, and they'll tell a story in a like a 1 minute space.
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of that, but I'm not very good at it. There are people on there like if you're going to TikTok and you're looking for D&D TikTok, because there's a whole section of TikTok that is just D&D TikTok. If you find Sarah is Coffee, a lot of her videos are that, and they are really compelling. And
Sid's another one that does that kind of stuff.
yeah, Sid's another one. There are a lot of people working in that space. Like D&D TikTok is broken up into, here's people offering advice, here's people offering encouragement, here are people doing those sort of lip sync dramatic videos,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of crossover between those spaces. I mean, Shando, the D&D mom, Shando,
Okay.
uh, does a lot of community building, like encouraging people to do things, and hey, she even runs like a D&D club at a school she teaches at. So she's definitely in that space. And that's one of the things I like to do as well, is to sort of say, hey, D&D is for everybody. You're welcome here. Everybody has a space at the table. Uh, because, the internet is filled with terrible people sometimes. And unfortunately, a lot of the people who are telling people that they don't belong are in our age bracket,
Yeah. Yeah.
and,
I get
and kind of look like
it.
us. And I want to be the counter voice to that. I want to
Yeah.
say, no, you do actually belong here. We're glad to have you. You've made things better just by being here. Keep doing that. Um,
Well,
just as a counter.
I mean, if you want the thing that you enjoy to continue, you need people and you need new people consistently and constantly to keep it going. So even from a self-preservation kind of standpoint, it just makes sense to welcome
Absolutely.
more people into the hobby,
Yeah.
even for selfish reasons. But at the end of the day, it's a great hobby, and I think everyone can get stuff out of it.
Yeah. And I think, you know,
I'll
one of the
see
best.
I'll see how some people use the game and scratch my head sometimes, but at the same time, I'm just like, well, that's how they enjoy the game.
Yeah. And I think, the popularity of Dimension 20, Critical Role, Adventure Time,
Yeah,
um, has sort of, brought a bunch of new people into the hobby. And I think there is a natural tendency for the people who grew up when it was almost shameful to be a D&D player to feel like, where was this when we were coming up?
yeah,
Yeah, it wasn't cool back then. And I get why people might feel, I don't know, challenged, I guess is a word, by that. But my take is that I want more people to play with. I have I have friends that I play with regularly, and I enjoy playing with them. But there is something really compelling about playing with new people.
yeah. I mean, we were talking about before we went live a little bit about gaming and you not running games weekly games, but running them either bi-weekly or monthly or whatever.
Right?
And when we do that, and pretty much every group is a different group, like a different composition. So
Yeah.
so for some of them, it might actually be like a monthly game, but for like me and Ted, we kind of game weekly or at least 3 weeks out of the month. Um, but it tends to be different compositions, so you get to experience different players, different GMs. It's it broadens your horizons and keeps the game fresh.
Yeah, I love gaming at conventions. Like I wouldn't want to do a convention every month because that would be crazy. But I love gaming at conventions because I get to play with new people and play new games and like see what other people are doing because it makes what I do better. Like I'll see somebody do something that I hadn't thought of and I'll be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I can do that. I can incorporate that or I can make that my own. Like I can do my own version of that." Or sometimes it's just a good way to meet people.
Yeah.
I suffer from social anxiety. I think a lot of people do. It comes with depression.
Oh, I'll tell you how to get over that. Right. Get a significant other, spouse, partner, whatever you want to call them, that comes from a super large family that loves to gather and congregate all the time, who you mostly have nothing in common with.
Yeah.
or we might call it trauma. I don't know, but that has been how that is how I've combated it.
Um, but yeah, meeting people in a context where there is a framework for your socialization. So a
Yeah.
game makes it easier. Like, oh, okay, well, we're all here to play a game. We all have that commonality. And then you can sort of get to know each other through that. And that's something
No,
good.
that's an amazing thing. I think that is one of the things that we miss a little bit with the where the game is gone and with the online gaming, because with sometimes with organized play, but also with people who are just meeting in chat rooms, finding a group and playing, they only come together for the game. So it's always just about the game. So from that, we've gotten all these weird questions that make me go, "Who are you playing with?" Like, because I've always seen it
Oh,
as,
yeah.
like, an invitation to my gaming table is an invitation of friendship, right? Like, we're gonna be friends. We'll probably
Right.
interact outside of the game, and it's a social event. But when you start removing those elements, it does create some oddities.
Yeah. And I hear horror stories.
Yeah.
And the protector version of me, the protector in me wants to go and find the people who did the like show me the DM who did this to you so that I can go have a discussion with them.
Yeah.
Um
Discussion.
yes. A discussion involving lever physics.
Yeah.
Yes. Blunt force trauma. Because like, I've heard stories particularly from women where, they were made to feel uncomfortable because the DM decides that they have to have a relationship, a romantic relationship with one of the NPCs, or other less pleasant things. And we've seen some public examples of that
Yeah.
on the online gaming spaces, and like what's wrong with you people? You're supposed to be having fun and enjoying each other's company. Yes, some gaming can be dark and meaningful and you can have some things, but you got to make sure everybody's on board with it. If they're not, then it's not fun.
Yeah, the session should not be a way for you to fulfill your dark fantasies, whether you're the DM or one of the players at the table. You need to read the room and understand, and probably social contracts, session zero, some
Yeah.
things you don't just go blindsiding people.
Uh,
So a
yeah.
little bit speaking to the public gaming, and actually you ran a bunch of games at virtual Gen Con. This question kind of ties in. Brian wants to know tips for prepping a couple of one shots that are easy for newbies to enjoy. Looking to expand my circle and try to get some of my buddies' spouses involved too. Ha ha ha. Well, first you have to make sure they want to be involved, but there's
Yeah.
that.
Uh, uh, First, don't spring it on them, don't force it. But if they come to you and say, "Yeah, I'd like to play," start with um, make it straightforward. Don't get too elaborate. Give a beginning, middle, and end. Make sure that the conflicts are clear and that there doesn't require a lot of more subtlety than you want to try for the first game. Let's say. Um, and give them characters that have something that will play into a power fantasy. So something that they can do that makes them feel awesome. Like, I have a cool wolf that does what I command it to, or I can transform into a bear. Those are really cool things that make them feel awesome. Try and steer away from encounters that make them feel powerless for their first game. There's some interesting stories to be playing around with. Your characters start out powerless and build up, but don't do that for their first game. That would be my recommendation. Honestly, the starter set adventure for 5e is really good.
Well, which one? There's a bunch now. Do they like Rick and Morty? You could go there. Do they like Stranger Things? I actually like the Stranger Things one
Yeah,
better than like Delvers.
yeah,
Uh,
that's fair. And I think what's the other box set? It's not the starter set. It's
yeah, I know what you're talking about, but it is falling out of my head.
yeah, the name of it's like the extended set, or that's not right.
No, it starts with an eight.
Yeah, but expanded. I,
uh,
I
they're
don't.
probably gonna throw it in the chat any second now.
Yeah,
When I was reading through like the Strangers Thing set, like what struck me about that set was it reminded me of playing the kind of like the box set version when I was a kid, and it also is like, oh, I feel like this would be easy for someone who's never run the game to run the game,
yeah.
where like Dragons of Icespire Peak Essentials kit, that's it.
The essentials. That was it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. The
where
essentials kit is actually pretty good, um, as a starter thing. But
yeah, and the biggest thing is like the kind of the will has to be there. Like my wife is recently started playing, but like that's taken 20 plus years, and very rare. And she decided on her own that she wanted to play, and I think that's super important. My son, it didn't stick the first time that I tried, and I just left him alone, and then he came to me and wanted to play. And my daughter will probably never want to play, so it's just different. It's not for everybody. It's for the people that want to do it.
um, I think also for setting up a one shot, visual aids help. Like, do something with a map, do something with pictures. That sometimes helps. And maybe have at least one player in the group that is not new, so that they can help the people who are that are new with an example, if nothing else. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you see other people role playing at the table, you are more likely to role play at the table.
It's less weird.
Yeah, it's less weird.
Yeah.
So yeah, having somebody who's experienced be a player there certainly helps. Um,
Yeah, my experience has been with new players. Very rarely have I found the new player that wants to jump into the deep end of the RPing right from the beginning.
yeah,
They do exist, but most people will talk about their character in third person in the beginning, and it's a little bit more like gamey, which is okay. As they get more comfortable, they'll probably do more. Then there's my nephew who's 13, who is super quiet and barely talks until we start playing D&D. And then he's like talking with accents and going full ham.
yeah. I
So
mean, it's easier when you see somebody else at the table do it. Definitely. And beyond that, give them a chance to feel invested. Like, one of the best ways to convince people that they actually care is to give them something to care about.
mm,
So, like, have them save the little kid and have to protect the kid from the goblins, or have them be followed by the puppy or something like that. They will fall in love with that NPC or animal companion, and will become invested in what happens to them.
Yeah, I think one of the keys too is just listening as a DM and trying to
Yeah,
like if you listen for those cues, like if they show interest in that child, then that's a great way to go because they've already shown interest, so you know they're probably gonna cling to that. Same thing with the puppy example as well. But it could be anything really in the
yeah,
game. If they seem particularly interested about it and maybe it wasn't important, you can always just shift the importance.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think bringing new people into a game is it's a delicate time because you can ruin it for them. You know, if you get a little heavy handed, if you um, maybe belittle them for poor tactical decisions or what have you. So you want to be in a situation where you are making them feel awesome about playing. If you find yourself trying to make them feel bad in any way, you're probably doing it wrong.
Yeah, like so my son was playing a monk turtle, and at first he was playing Way of the Four Elements, and then someone told him that's the worst monk. Now, I when he decided to play that, I know that's the worst monk mechanically, but I don't care because that's just what he wants to play, right? So
Sure.
play it. And then he wanted to switch because someone told him it was the worst.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, it's only the worst if that's the way you perceive it.
Yeah.
And when you don't know the difference, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. There is a phrase that I have learned to loathe with all of my heart back in 3.5 days, and it still floats around. You're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Like, I want to play a wizard that does this. I want to play a gnome barbarian. You're doing it wrong. No, no, you're not doing it wrong. You're making the character you want to make, and have fun with that. If somebody says, "Hey, what can I do to make something better?" Offer advice, but never actually tell them, "Hey, you're just doing it wrong."
It's not
Because
very constructive.
yeah, it makes them feel bad about themselves. I came up with this idea, and you're telling me my idea is bad. That's no good.
Yeah. And sometimes too, like I've got another player just that recently started. They're very new, and they're playing a monk, Way of the Four Elements. Why? Because they like they like Avatar.
Sure,
So it's like yeah, just let them play and have fun. I might do something with that character a little bit later to kind of help with the key balance, which is a little problematic, but overall,
sure,
like they found a way to attach to the game. So I'm not going to crap all over that thing that made them interested.
sure.
Because we can because I think the mechanics are like the least important thing when they first get started in the game.
Yeah,
Anyway, it's like don't here's a character sheet and here's the things you can do, but just tell me what you want to do and we'll take it from there.
yeah. I mean, if somebody comes to me and says, "I want to make a character from Avatar: The Last Airbender," if they don't have a preconception based off the rule book what that is, I'm probably going to tell them to make a sorcerer because it's a little closer. Um, but if they come to me and says, "I read the rule book and I want to play this," I'm going to let them play that and do what I can to make it work for them. Um, yeah, I had a debate in online with people about whether or not Avatar the characters on Avatar are monks. I argue that most of them aren't. Most of them are probably closer to sorcerers or warlocks, um, because classes are how you do a thing. They are not what you are.
Mm.
And um, Aang doesn't punch anyone. He really doesn't. He doesn't punch anyone. He uses his powers to damage people. So he's probably actually a sorcerer. Like,
makes sense.
Yeah.
I have not actually watched Avatar, or at least I've seen it, but I haven't watched it.
Well, you should correct that because it's really good. Um, it's actually really compelling epic fantasy material. I mean, genuinely good epic fantasy storytelling.
Well, it's
Uh,
recently come to Netflix, so there's a good possibility I will at some point correct that.
and they're also going to release Korra on Netflix, which is the follow-up series, which is starts with an older character and goes from there. Um, but yeah, the good epic fantasy, and it's an onboard for a lot of people. Like I read The Hobbit as a kid, so that shaped a lot of my early D&D experiences.
Yeah.
A lot of kids these days have grown up watching The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, what have you, and that's what they kind of expect when they play D&D. So when they see Avatar, they think that's what D&D is. Or if they watch Critical Role or Dimension 20 or what have you, they'll think that's what D&D is. And D&D is can be all of those things. You just have to set it up correctly. You have to lean into those tropes and do stuff with them.
So, poison, the best description of classes, how you do a thing, not who you are. Respect. So they appreciate that comment. And yeah, like we've always done that too, mechanically, as well as use them to describe what we do more so than who they are. Where there's definitely a contingent of very steadfast. No, that's like your job, your occupation.
Sure. And that's a holdover from earlier editions, certainly.
Yeah.
Like barbarians hating all magic is an early edition thing.
Used to get
Uh
XP for destroying magic items.
yeah, but like now if you play a barbarian, well you can play a noble barbarian. You're just a barbarian with anger issues. All right, cool. Or a noble with anger issues, or you could be a sage barbarian. There's nothing that prevents that. You just really don't like it when people break your books. Um, and rangers, their capabilities are mainly oriented towards the wilderness, so you could probably say that they spend a lot of time in the wilderness, but there's nothing says that they have to be what you picture a ranger looking like.
Doesn't have
um,
to be Aragorn or Dritz.
right, and a bard doesn't have to be what's the name of the character from The Witcher that follows around The Witcher?
I do not know that character's name. I watched it.
Yeah,
I never played the games though either. I
but
don't
you
know
know
if
what
it.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about, the guy who wanders around and
Yeah.
um, yeah, yeah. It's you don't have to follow a trope for a class. You can do other things with a class.
Yeah.
Um,
Even though I have a D&D channel and we play a lot of D&D, I will say the class system isn't one of the best systems when it comes to RPGs when you're trying to define a character and create characters. That's why D&D is in itself its own trope. But
yeah,
most games that come out, they've leaned very heavily away from classes.
sure. Or at least minimize them to a point where they're abstractions. Like
Yeah.
I'm a fan of the age system, and the fantasy age system is you're either a mage or a rogue or a fighter, and it's just variations in those things. You could be the holy fighter that uses magic, and so you're a paladin, or the rogue could be a ranger, or it can be a rogue, or it can be what have you. Mages can be clerics or battle mages, but they abstract it down to those three because really it's just this is how you do a thing. This isn't who you are.
Yeah, we're playing the Expanses, which is another
Oh
age
yeah.
system, which really, like, I guess I don't even see it as having classes, but I guess
Modern age doesn't. So
Belter, Martian, and Earther are kind of your classes.
yeah, and I love Expanse. I backed the Kickstarter. I read the novels before there was a show, and I love the show, and so yeah, it's a game I have that I haven't had a chance to play, sadly.
It's been fun. Like, so I've got things I like about the age system and but they're the same things I don't like about the age system.
Sure.
The stunt system is a bit clunky, but I also like it. But
Yeah.
it's not intuitive, nor is it fast at the when you're starting out.
It definitely takes a transition if you're coming from D&D,
Yeah,
because D&D starts with, I'm doing a thing and I roll dice to see if I succeed. Age system starts with, I'm doing a thing, I roll dice, okay, I succeeded, but now I can add a bunch of cool things
yeah.
to what I was doing.
So my clarification is the fact that like at least in the Expanse, it's like every single thing you could possibly do seems to have a category which has a stunt table for.
Yeah,
So it is just a lot of tables
sure.
to do. And you might do something that has several tables to choose from. Uh, so it can definitely slow things down a little bit.
Yeah, I think the tables are there more or less to make it easier for you to visualize what you can do.
Yeah.
But honestly, there's no reason you have to follow them for the most part. You can just say, I got some stunts. Can I do this? And the game master uses those tables as a, yeah, sure, you can do that. You know, like they're there to give you ideas. You
Yeah.
shouldn't be referencing them at the table. If that makes sense.
Yeah. But I guess there's like the severity depending on how many points you have to spend kind of
Sure.
determines like how much of something you can get off is. But but also so our GM is new
Uh,
to it to the system. Like I think this is their first time running it. So we're all kind of like learning together.
yeah. Yeah.
Um and I believe they're also the only one that has read the actual books and rules. Uh but I did get like the Expanse was interesting to me, and like I had never read the books, but I saw the Kickstarter. I'm a fan of Green Ronin and the stuff that
Oh
they
yeah.
do, and that like prompted me to check out the series on Amazon. And then I was like, "Oh, I would really like to play this." And then that was one of the games that I got my wife into, and and then she went back and rewatched the series with me. She hadn't seen it, so and I rarely rewatch things, but the Expanse was definitely worth a rewatch.
Oh yeah. It's really good. The TV series is excellent, and it is an example of, you don't necessarily have to have blasters or what have you, and to make compelling, interesting sci-fi stories. Science doesn't have to be the blocker to drama. Science can just be the source of the drama. Watching the guys fly around on the ship and it has to change orbit suddenly and everything flies across the room,
Yeah,
that's compelling. That's, and it's all born from the science. It doesn't interrupt anything. It actually makes things more interesting. So, sorry, soapbox.
no, that's fine. And also, but to that effect, like mechanically, that game, it's like you're fighting. You have a pistol, you have a rifle, you have a light weapon, you have a heavy weapon. So the
Yeah,
mechanics are very light.
yeah, and yeah, it's my fear is I will get to play and I'll start speaking in a Belter Creole, and then everybody will look at me funny, like, what the hell is wrong with you?
Oh man, I almost feel like watching the show, the Belters need subtitles sometimes.
Yeah, and I like that they don't have them.
Yeah.
Like, it makes it feel more real that they don't have subtitles, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. There's definitely like it's like back something like that they say, and they do the hand gesture, and
Yeah,
it's definitely like, oh, he just told him to go f himself. So
yeah, yeah, and you know, and you pick up things from cues. Like, somebody says "sasa," you know that they kind of mean, you know what I mean,
yeah,
or do you get me? And if somebody says, "beltalada," that's basically, belter pride. Okay, cool. You know, but you pick it up in the cues that they do there, and that it's really weird. Is uh, one of the actresses from the show, Kara G, who plays the what's her name? What's the name of the character?
Naomi
No,
or
the head of the ship in the third season.
oh, the commander for the Belters.
Yeah,
I do not know her name, but I know the character you're talking about.
yeah, drummer. Knew it would come to me. Yeah, so she sits there and does the Belter Creole through every scene,
Yeah.
and you expect her to sound like English is a second language when you hear her interviewed away from it, and it isn't.
Yeah, yeah.
So it throws you. Like, she is so invested in making that sound like a believable thing that when you hear her actually speak with her real voice, you're like, wait, oh, you don't have that accent.
Yeah, yeah, it becomes weird.
Yeah. Like listening to Hugh Laurie talk when he's interviewed, and he's English,
Mhm.
but he played uh, uh, the doctor on House
Yeah.
on TV for so long that hearing him with an English accent is off-putting.
Yeah, you know the character, not the actor that plays the character, so that becomes the real person, in your mind. I totally
Yeah.
get that. So you have a favorite character from The Expanse?
Uh, it's hard not to love Amos.
Yeah, I'm right. I don't feel like I don't feel like I have like a favorite character. I just have a least favorite character.
Who's
Like
your least favorite?
Holden is the least compelling character to me throughout the whole series.
I think the interesting thing about Holden is like midway through the books, at least, you kind of get the oh god, will you please shut up?
Yeah,
But as he progresses, he becomes. It's interesting to watch that the character actually grows up as he goes along. He changes.
hmm.
Like, he starts at one place and is different at the end, and you don't actually see that a lot in popular media, and that's interesting in and of itself. But yeah, there's a time period where, like, will you shut up? to hold him. But yeah, I think Amos is probably one of the more interesting characters because in any other story he's a villain, but
Yeah,
because he's with these people, he stops himself from being a villain.
yeah. The fun thing about that character is exactly that. Like he clings to certain people because he knows they make him better, but he. It's interesting in the fact that like he knows what better is, but he doesn't know how to do it. So he needs other people to kind of be his guidelines. And he says, and he's aware of it. Like that's like the really interesting part. Like his fascination with the scientists and what they do to the scientists, which I won't
Yeah,
go too deeply, so I don't want to spoil it for people. Is like he's having that aha moment, like, oh well, if that's how they're broken, how can I fix? Can I use this to fix me?
yeah. Alex is also Alex is the sort of heart of the show, and I
Yeah,
think I like him as well. Just from the, it would be tempting to think of him as soft, but he isn't.
yeah.
You know, um, and I like him. I also am a big fan of Ava Sorala. Um, I
Uh,
love that
she's so
she is.
evil for the right reasons.
I mean, she is ruthless. She's
Yeah.
not evil necessarily, but she is absolutely ruthless. And
Well, I say evil because she has no limits as far as what she'll do.
yeah, yeah. And I love that she's this foul-mouthed old grandmother.
Yeah.
Like, we're just going to invert a trope here. Like, the grandmother is usually this pleasant, comforting sort, and she is absolutely not comforting. She
No.
she is not here for your feelings.
And I mean that's what makes that show so good all around. Is like you get so much of that, and where they're turning those tropes on their heads, they're completely different. And it was funny for us like building out our game in session 0, because only only me and the GM were familiar with the material,
Sure.
And I'm like, you know, depending on, you know, what kind of player you are, I feel like it's hard to not want to play a Martian after watching, watching
Bobby.
the series, because you're like,
Yeah.
Bobby is such a badass and so amazing. The Earthers are slightly less compelling, but then like trying to explain to people, what a Belter is and what a Martian is, and like, Belters are basically space hillbillies, and and Martians are, the Martians are, I just think soldier, and they're very militant.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Tennessee, so I have a certain amount of appreciation for hillbillies.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, and I can go on about that for days, but I love the Belters. I think that Belters feel more compelling now in some regards than when I first saw them, because a lot of the societal echoes going on right now are about oppressed peoples, and the Belters are absolutely oppressed peoples resisting the oppression that they're under.
yeah.
So,
In in
yeah,
ways that you can't even imagine, like relying on people for things like air and water,
yeah,
like air, like no matter how oppressed you are on Earth, you can just breathe for the most part, right?
right,
It would be such an extreme case, which I mean there are some parallels, um,
yeah,
but yeah, but the Belders like water and air, which is kind of regulated to them by Earth and the Martians. So it's like it's kind of crazy.
yeah. It's certainly in this particular year, uh, where everything has been much upheaval. It is hard not to feel a kinship with the Belters. Um, I mean, to a certain extent, the Earth is the oppressive society everybody else has to deal with, um, and we see that in the real world. There the people who are part of that society aren't necessarily evil, but they're part of a system,
Yeah,
and that is reflected in the Expanse, and that's really interesting too. Mars is Mars is weird because Mars is a thing we don't see. Mars is a society built around a really long term vision,
yeah.
and that doesn't exist. We don't have that in our world.
In this day and age, everything's about immediacy. Yeah, and from a game standpoint, I mean, combat has always been a big part of RPGs. At least
Sure.
most of the ones I've played. And the I feel like the things that happen in those shows are just fun. Like the Martian Marines are just like machines, and then the Belters in Zero G, seeing them fight and maneuver is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, when you among other things, when you come from a society where life is super cheap,
Yeah,
you are willing to take the crazy because what are you going to do? Die?
yeah.
That could happen anyway. Um, and yeah, I think the characters in science fiction I want to play are the capable engineer.
Yeah.
So I would probably do that in a game, is lean into playing an engineering character, and helping keep the ship going, and um, so I'd probably want to be like a Belter or Martian engineer. I think that would be pretty
We've
compelling.
got a party of Belters, so
Oh, okay.
some of us are ex OPA.
Well, I mean, Naomi is a good example of the Belter engineer. Obviously,
Yeah.
she's really smart. She saves the day multiple times just by being capable.
Well, yeah, if you think about it, especially in a game like a game or show or genre like that, where like really in the larger scheme of things, it's just like these thin sheets of metal between you and death
Oblivion, yeah.
at all times. Uh, but all of that being said, I'm enjoying the conversation, but we're past the hour mark now.
I noticed.
So I will not detain you anymore, sir. I appreciate you coming on. Any final words before we head out?
Uh, well, I suppose I would be bad at self promotion if I didn't plug the fact that I just released an adventure this week on DM's Guild called the Lost Library of Meldorin. And It'd be nice if people went and checked it out. We're all a little tighter on money this year than we'd like, so I understand if they don't. But it's a one-shot adventure for 6th-level D&D players. So.
Cool. If you get me the link to that, I will put it in the description.
Can do.
And the pin post for people. Also, I don't know if you have a spot on that on your website, but the links are as usual in the description. And until next time, stay nerdy.